What's the worst thing you have ever done to an annoying neighbor? Part 2. Story 14. In our first house, my wife and I had a neighbor who disliked us from the start. Apparently, the people that lived there before us were family friends who went through a divorce, and we were the ones who bought their house. They were petty and mean to my wife, who doesn't like confrontation, parking across our driveway when she's about to go to work, throwing pieces of wood over the fence, letting their dog crap on our lawn and not picking it up, etc. I tried talking to them a couple times, too, and was promptly told to F off. The husband loved his lawn care and used to brag about how it looked to everyone, so the next time it rained, I went out back and threw an entire box of OXO cubes into their backyard and let the rain melt them into the grass. Their dog absolutely destroyed their yard looking for the smell, and I would make sure to comment on it every chance I got. We moved shortly after. What are OXO cubes, like dog treats? Story 15. My parents have an extremely nosy neighbor who would just stand at the fence and watch what we do. I mean, with her nose resting on the top of the fence. This woman is 60s with kids and grandkids. I found out the other day my dad was in the garden with a shovel. It turns out he throws the slugs and snails in their trampoline and on their veggie plot for being annoying every time they aren't there. I couldn't stop laughing at how petty and hilarious this was. Still makes my day. Her nose resting on the top of the fence. This is where you glove up one night, find some poison ivy, and rub it all over the top where she snoops. See how much longer she pulls that crap after getting poison ivy rash up her nose. Story 16. When I was a kid, the neighbor's dog, large breed, kept using our front and backyard for a bathroom. We asked on multiple occasions for them to clean up the feces. They gave us a bunch of attitude about it, and eventually they made a half-butted attempt to clean up a small portion of it. Finally, after months of frustration and stepping in dog crap while mowing the grass, my dad cracked. He proceeded to pick up enough crap to fill a 5-gallon bucket and then dumped all of it in their brand new grill and closed the lid. That put a stop to it real quick. Story 17. Neighbor had a bad habit of parking too many cars in our really small parking lot. There were only enough spots for 2 cars per apartment, 4 apartments total. They often had 3 to 5 cars parked. I always had to ask them to vacate our parking spots when we got home, every day practically. The neighbor on the other side of me got their Pontiac stuck in the driveway because of the snow. They left it there overnight, and come the next morning, everyone needs to leave for work and whatnot. It's right in the middle of the driveway. I'm being yelled at, my Pontiac neighbor, and too many car neighbors. I guess they both expected me to fix the situation with my truck. I told my boyfriend at the time we were not helping either of them. They both went to him and asked if my truck could be used to get the car out. My truck. No. I dug out enough of the snowbank to get out and let them deal with it. Both of the neighbors got in my face and were yelling before I even said no, so it was a definite no. I give 0 fricks if you're going to yell at me for an issue you created. 0 fricks. Story 18. The rich brats next door were always throwing drunken parties when Mom and Dad went out of town for a few days, which was often. One Sunday morning, I went out to find the corner of our lot, which was a school bus stop, littered with used condoms that had been left in the street or thrown into the grass. That night around midnight, I gloved up and collected a bunch of them, then snuck into the neighbor's yard and scattered them around the pool, the garage, and the back door, where Mom was sure to see them when she came home. There were no more parties. You a neighborhood condom proved 99% effective in preventing unwanted parties. Story 19. We lived in a neighborhood of townhouses. One neighbor let their dogs crap all over everyone's lawn and never picked it up. We tried asking them. We tried picking it up and putting it on their doorsteps. They refused to do it. My one neighbor decided to get a piece of it and smear it all over the front of the house. After that, they started picking it up. I did something similar, except my neighbor left his car window down. I had a grocery bag full and put it in his car. This was in the summer, and it was well over 100 degrees outside. His dog never pooped on my lawn again. I have no real sympathies for people who don't clean up their dog's poop. Look, it's not fun. I get it. I have a Great Dane. Trust me, I know. But especially when it is someone else's yard or a small trail nearby where you live, that can build up over time if folks don't do their part. So pick up after your dang dogs, please. Story 20. He smeared his crap on my front door all because I was talking to his crush, told the crush what he did, and now is known as the crap-smearing pervert. Honestly, not even bad at all, just spreading true info. Story 21. They assaulted my dad because he told them to stop yelling at a woman parked in the road, so I bided my time for a few weeks, then filled all the locks on their work van with superglue. If they had power locks with a remote, they won't know until it's an emergency. Story 22. Neighbor's dog kept crapping in the front, like they opened the front door, let him out, and crap in our yard. I asked them like 10 times to just clean it up, no problem. They outright refused. So for about 2 months, I went out, picked it up, put it in a 5-gallon bucket outside in the backyard. When it was full of rainwater and crap, I walked over and dumped it on the front porch. It actually worked, and they started cleaning up after the dog. We actually have been cool since then. Here's a modification to your story. If that were ever to happen again, do exactly what you said, but lean it up against their front door, knock, and run. Story 23. This one's not my story, but my great-grandfather's. My great-grandfather was one of the last people in town to get indoor plumbing, and as such had an outhouse in his backyard. Every year on Halloween, neighborhood kids would come into the yard and knock over the building and expose the cesspit. He got tired of it. So one year, the night before Halloween, he moved the building forward, then covered the fess with burlap, disguising it in leaves and grass clippings. In the dark, it was almost impossible to tell it was there. Halloween night, he sat in the outhouse and waited. It wasn't long after sundown when he heard the wet splat outside as a couple of kids fell into the muck. He lowered the ladder into the cesspit for them to leave after making them promise to never mess with his outhouse again. The kids honored their promise and even spread the word around the neighborhood not to mess with that outhouse anymore. I like your pappy. That's hilarious. Honestly, those kids were going around giving tricks. It's only right that your great-grandfather got to play a trick of his own. Granted, it sounds like a pretty crappy thing to do to them, huh? I'll show myself out. Story 24. Poured a bunch of boxes of instant mashed potato powder on their lawn, so later when it rained, they had a lawn full of mashed potatoes. If I could upvote both this and the P-Disc 1,000 times, I would. Story 25. In college, I lived across from a frat house that would let people park in our spaces. Their router password was admin, so I logged into their router, banned all their MAC addresses, and changed the password. Never mess with a nerd who knows more about your crap than you do. Nice job. Story 26. A friend of mine has a good one. She lived in a ground floor apartment with a patio that faced a street. Every apartment in the building had either a patio or balcony facing the same direction. One night she's outside on her patio, having a glass of wine and relaxing, when a random dude she's never seen before comes walking down the street and rudely starts shouting at her. Dude explains that he lives across the street and the smell from her smoking cigarettes on her patio is bothering him. She explained that neither her nor her roommate smoke, so it must be coming from somewhere else. But this dude is adamant. She finally gets sick of being polite and tells him to leave her alone, and she goes inside. After that, he harasses her constantly, yelling at her every time he walks or drives by, calling her a FB and insisting she is smoking. She wasn't, but even if she was, it's allowed by the complex, so there's nothing he could do about it. Sometimes he does it in the middle of the night, and it's so loud it wakes up my friend and other neighbors. From talking to other neighbors, she learns the guy is nuts, but he specifically hates women and is probably targeting her because she is pretty and usually by herself. The last straw came when she was getting out of the shower and heard pounding on her patio door. The mother effer hopped her railing and was standing at the door, peering through her blinds at her to yell at her. She gave her 30-day notice after that and moved. But once she's in her new place, presumably where this guy would never find her, she calls me and asks for a favor. I worked at a bar at the time and had a big outdoor area. Lots of ashtrays out there to empty every night. I saved them up in a hefty bag for her every night. I worked for like a month and then gave her a super full bag. Apparently, the guy's car didn't have AC or something because she had noticed he left the windows partially rolled down at night sometimes. She snuck over to the dude's car in the middle of the night and dumped the entire trash bag of old cigarette butts into his car, handful by handful, making sure they got everywhere. And then drove home to her new apartment and never heard from the butthole guy again. That sucks that she was basically forced to move because that guy sounded potentially dangerous. And while some might call what she did unnecessary since she got away from him, I say it's a good wake-up call for the guy, and frankly, he deserves a hell of a lot worse, so I'm gonna give this one my Mr. Facts stamp of approval. Story 27. Had a neighbor in my apartment complex that kept letting her huge dog take huge poops in my yard space. Literally got to about 20 huge dog poops sitting outside my window, and I had enough. Put on a glove and picked up all the crap and dumped it on her doorstep. Left a note stabbed into the ground telling her to pick up her dog crap. She started picking up the crap and moved pretty soon after. LOL. Story 28. I put a spigot lock on our house because she kept using my hose and flooding my flower bed in the process. But the lady was peed. Story 29. My dad was talking to our neighbor about what color he should paint the house and said, as a joke, "Well, I might as well paint the old house blue, haha." The neighbor became almost angry and said stuff like, "You could not do that, a blue house? How stupid and annoying, how dumb," etc. And that's how I grew up in a blue house. Also, what is wrong with a blue house? My dad's house was blue for a long time, and I've seen tons of blue houses. I feel like your dad's neighbor needs to calm down, maybe have a cup of cocoa or something. Story 30. When I was really young, our neighbor, Druggy, demanded we move our septic tank because he claimed it was partially on his property. He was a complete jerk about it and kept at it. My dad's a really laid-back person. Eventually, even he got mad and had the property line surveyed. It turns out not only was the septic tank on our property, not his, but the corner of his house and part of his driveway was actually on our land. Dad spent the next few months asking him when he was going to move his house off our land. I wonder if he legally could remove the section of the house and driveway on his property. Story 31. Didn't realize how loud our home improvement projects were. Our units share a wall, and my neighbor works from home. Neighbor blew her top because she didn't know when the noise would end. Apologized with a gift basket of fruits and chocolate. Now we get along great. A lot of time communication is key. Prior to starting a project, just putting a note on the doors of those affecting saying you will do this and estimate it will take X amount of time will go a long way to help. Here we go. Another reminder that sometimes communication is key. We could use a lot more of this kind of attitude these days. But of course, it won't always go smoothly, but at least you get to know you were the better person if it doesn't work. Then, as the better person, you won't feel so bad when you destroy them with your sinister machinations. Story 32. Loud party neighbors all the time till 4 to 5 in the a.m. I would hijack their Bluetooth speakers and play aggressive adult entertainment on full glass until they turned it off. Samuel L. Jackson reading Go the Frick to Sleep would have also been a hilarious choice. Story 33. My mom's neighbor called the city to demand they make my mom repair her fence that divided their yard. This lady has always been a crabapple for 10 plus years, but this move peed my mom off. The fence did need a few mild repairs, which my mom would have done if the neighbor had just come talk to her. She was already in the process of getting quotes. The city contacted my mom and says, "You have to maintain your fence." My mom asks if she legally has to have a fence, and the person she talked to could sense where this was going. Turns out there are rules about maintaining a fence, but not requiring you to have one, so my mom pays a contractor to tear it down entirely. The neighbor comes to talk to my mom and asks when the new fence will be built. My mom says, "You want a fence? Build it yourself." Couple weeks later, my mom has a nice new fence courtesy of one annoying neighbor. A little petty perhaps, but hilarious nonetheless. This is the grown-up version of your mom telling you to do the dishes while you are on your way to do the dishes. Honestly, stories like this make me happy that I get along really well with both of our neighbors. They're both elderly couples, and I've helped out around the yard for them, and we have a lovely time. At first, I was a little sad not having folks my age that I could maybe be friends with, but after reading these, I'm super happy to hang out with some cool older folks. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.